Okay, notice that the audience in that Sawyer clip reacted the same way my research participants do. He's great, she's yuck. In fact, when I would debrief undergraduate participants in one of my backlash studies, often that's how, especially the women, would respond to me. I'd say, what don't you like about her? And they would just kind of go, yuck. And I thought, okay, my job as a scientist is to try to figure out what yuck means. The question is why? Where is that coming from? Finding out what's not to like about strong, self-confident women is key to solving the backlash puzzle. Important, backlash is not engaged in arbitrarily. It must be motivated. As shown on the next slide, cultural stereotypes cause gender vanguards to be viewed as gender deviants, but people punish them only when they feel justified in doing so. Moreover, because rejecting vanguards makes them invisible rather than role models, backlash reinforces cultural stereotypes, which feeds a vicious cycle. So this figure is in your book, so hopefully this is just triggering a memory. Cultural stereotypes cause vanguards to be viewed as deviant, and then when perceivers are justified, they engage in backlash, which can be social or economic penalties, outright sabotage, as I'll show you today. And then as a result, that feeds back into cultural stereotypes. And justification is highlighted in red on this slide because it's the focus of much of what I'll be talking about today, trying to figure out that mediating box that we call justification. So what motivates backlash? Like many gender researchers, I assume that agentic women were punished for violating communal stereotypes. But try as we might, the evidence to support that intuitive hypothesis was not forthcoming. So I started to see clues that status violations were key. Remember last time I talked about the Rudman and Kiliansky study in which we found that automatic prejudice against female authority figures was high on the part of both genders. And then there were some other clues as well. But reminder from an earlier lecture, female communality is prescribed for women. These are the quality women should be, but it's not linked to status. So men's gender prescriptions are high in status. This is the agency list for men, and the communality list for women. The status D is 0.08, which is about as close to 0 as you can get. For guys, it's 1.27, which is way off the charts for a large effect size. Okay, and that's because some of the qualities are low in status, some are high in status, but many more are neutral in status. So everything kind of washes out. However, when we looked at what women and men cannot be, that's where we found this kind of mirror image where what men can't be is low in status, what women can't be is high in status. So again, to remind you, what men should be and what women cannot be are linked to high status. What men cannot be is linked to low status. What women should be is not linked to status. So can we apply these findings to backlash? If so, we're going to make the following predictions. Agentic women should receive a dominance penalty. That is, perceptions that they embody the high status traits prohibited for women but not for men, traits like dominant and arrogant, and therefore they suffer backlash for status violations more so than for enacting high status agentic traits that are prescribed for men but not prohibited for women, such as ambitious or independent, or failing to uphold female communality prescriptions that are mostly neutral in status, for instance, being friendly or kind. Note that dominance is a masculine trait. People stereotype that as masculine, but an agentic woman is predicted to be seen as more dominant than an identical man. That is the dominance penalty. In other words, we're predicting that female agency causes people to reverse their gender stereotypes. Usually a hard thing to do, so if we manage to do it, it's pretty big news. We don't expect agentic women to be viewed as less communal than identical men because communality has no implications for the gender status quo. It's like skiing and a Norwegian. Nobody cares, right? Like it has nothing to do with the status of individual Norwegian or Norway's standing in the world, whether or not a Norwegian skis or not. Although agency is high in status, we don't predict it will differ because it's not prohibited for women. Plus, it's positive. Those are positive traits. And, you know, when people don't like someone, they look for reasons to reject them. Dominance fills that bill because it's both negative and prohibited for women. So in 2012, we ran 3 experiments that supported these hypotheses. In each case, participants evaluated an agentic man or woman, and in each study, the agentic man was liked more and was more likely to be hired despite equal competence. So far, it's the same old story I've been telling you about. But new to this study, we added ratings of the 4 gender rules, which I'll show you what those scales consisted of on the next slide. You can pause the video and stare at them. And the results for these 4 gender rules were also always the same. So go ahead and pause the slide so you can read this at your leisure. Oh. Okay, so what did we find? Here's agentic women's dominance penalty. Female applicants are rated as higher on dominance than male applicants, whereas there were no gender differences in communality, that's the gray bars, weakness, that's the orange bars. Everyone thought, oh, these aren't weak people at all. Or agency, it's almost identical, right? So that's the one gender rule that gets women in trouble is dominance. In essence, women are held hostage to gender roles that perpetuate inequality by reserving these sort of dominant, high-powered traits for men. They're traits we expect of leaders, but we won't tolerate them in women. Until women are afforded the same latitude as men to strive for power and wield it, an equal opportunity and unequal treatment in the workplace will persist. But what happens, though, if women are hired as leaders? Maybe being a leader somehow, however she managed to get there, will save her from backlash. So to test that idea, in a 4 study, we recruited Rutgers undergraduate students for a work team study in which they met a Confederate, either a guy or a gal, who they thought would be their partner. It's a work team study after all. The experimenter explained that one of them would be randomly assigned to be the leader, the other the subordinate. The Confederate then said, I hope I get to be the leader. In reality, the Confederate was always assigned to be the leader and the participant the subordinate because we rigged the drawing. Escorted to separate cubicles, participants then learned how their leader had scored on a leadership intelligence test or aptitude test, ostensibly taken weeks in advance because you may remember that you all signed up for the RPU system if you were at Rutgers for your Intro to Psych course. And so as part of that, you went through the psychology department survey. It's just like a pre-screening, right? So that was believable to people. And then we showed participants how their leaders had scored under 2 conditions. In one condition, they were told the leader had scored low in the 40th percentile. In the other condition, they were told their leader had scored high in the 90th percentile. What should we expect? Will it be the case that people reject dumb leaders or smart ones, and will their gender matter? We expected only smart, high-scoring female leaders to suffer backlash because only they challenge patriarchy. In addition to dominance ratings, we used a measure of sabotage in this study, defined as harming the leader's ability to succeed. The experimenter explained that to save time while he or she prepared the leader for the rest of the session, participants would program an anagram task that would give the leader a bonus, but only if they performed well. Participants received an anagram and its solution and were told that the Confederate had to type in the correct answer within 30 seconds in order to score points. Participants were told to choose only one clue from a list of 3 possible clues for each of 10 anagrams. And then we had pre-tested the 3 clues so that they ranged from low to high on being helpful. A sample anagram was this one. The answer is pancreas. The clues for which were as follows. The unhelpful clue was it starts with the letter P. The medium clue was it's an organ in your body, and the helpful clue was it's the organ in your body that starts with P. Results are scored so that a high score equals more sabotage, and the next slide shows the results by leader gender and whether they had scored high or low on the leadership aptitude test. So in the high leader intelligence test, you see that the female leader was sabotaged much more so than the male leader. There's no difference in the low leader intelligence condition, right? But you can also see that the smart female leader was sabotaged more so than any other leader in the study. In addition, participants rated their leader on the 4 gender rules: agency, communality, weakness, and dominance. And as expected, smart female leaders were rated higher in dominance than all other leaders. That's that dominance penalty we've already talked about. And then finally, only dominance ratings predicted sabotage scores, but only for smart female leaders. So here's the correlation table. Here's smart female leader sabotage scores was correlated 0.35 with their dominance ratings, and then for nobody else was there a significant correlation between how dominant they were perceived and whether they were sabotaged. To summarize, smart female leaders were sabotaged for being, quote, too powerful for a woman, unquote. Men were not punished for scoring high or low on a leadership test, and women who scored low were also left alone. After all, they do not threaten the gender hierarchy the way competent female leaders do. Now, translate this to the workplace, or if you're a politician trying to get elected. If female vanguards are undermined even when, or especially when, they're good at their jobs, their chances of getting ahead are slim if people feel justified in undermining them, downright sabotaging them, which then ultimately renders the vanguard impotent to challenge stereotypes that men make better leaders, right? They get pushed to the side, they're rendered invisible. Nobody knows that women can be fantastic politicians or leaders in an organization because of the rough road that women have to the top. So this process is exactly why backlash perpetuates gender stereotypes in society. By pinpointing dominance as the gender rule responsible for backlash, the only female rule that's linked to status, it shows that defending the gender status quo is a key motive for backlash. Agentic women, in essence, are punished for being uppity rather than for violating stereotypes by failing to act dumb or to be nice enough. But some people like strong, self-confident women. I imprinted on them when I was in graduate school in particular. So when I started doing this research, I expected a gender difference. I kind of thought that women would be more persuaded and find strong, self-confident women more compelling than men who might feel like their masculinity is threatened or some such. That's not what I found. I don't find any gender differences in backlash effects. So, as a result, finding out who doesn't like strong, self-confident women is the next step.